Welcome to the Food Chase training. Today we'll be starting our module number 5 of Smart and Sustainable Food Production Systems. And the subject we'll be talking about today is directly connected to sustainable practices for crop loss prevention and resilience. I will be walking you through the presentation, starting with the learning outcomes, and the main objective here is to pre-introduce you to the themes that you will be able to explore and study on the written material that is the bulky version of what we are presenting, okay? We have some exercise that will help you fix the knowledge, but now we start our introduction and I hope you enjoy it. I'm Professor Rafael and let's start. The learning outcomes, as I said, at the end of the submodule, students will be able to apply soil cultivation practices, the knowledge of it, that reduce crop vulnerability and yield losses or loss, design fertilization strategies that improve nutrient use efficiency and yield stability, implement IPM to minimize crop damage and pesticide dependency, understand what does mean integrate pest management as well, select and manage resistant and resilient crop varieties, understanding how it is selected, why it's important, which ways are, the papers will help you understanding this, give you a main idea, and align agronomic practices with the European Union's sustainability, food security, and farm-to-fork objectives. Let's go to the introduction to the submodule. Crop loss prevention is most effective when agronomic practices are integrated, rather than applied as isolated reactive interventions, okay? Soil management, fertilization, pest control, and crop genetics function as interdependent components of agro-ecosystems. Jointly, you see there was a word, jointly shaping productivity, resilience, environmental performance. We don't want to think about practices that are separate, but we want to think that practices that actually adds up, stacking up, going up, and they all together deliver a better environmental, resilience, and productivity response. In European farming system, yield losses are increasingly linked to soil degradation, nutrient inefficiency, pest resistance, and climate-related stresses, highlighting the limits of input-intensive approaches. This very last expression here, input-intensive approach, is something that used to be adopted back in the days. People tend to understand that if I put more resources into my production, my crop, I'll have more products. Actually not. You have the optimum and you have the maximum. Two things are different. The optimum is related to the capacity of the plants, of the animals, to respond accordingly. The maximum is the maximum that the system supports. Doesn't mean that's sustainable. It's just a number, okay? Crop loss prevention as a system outcome. You see here on the right-hand side, the farming concept figure, which is from a paper as well. These I have extracted from a paper that I shared with you on actually this link here. There is a link you can click, or maybe on the written material as well. Maybe not, I'm sure. On the written material, click, you actually access it and compares the concept, of organic and conventional production, okay? And compares by showing how those two different ways of thinking are divided into natural process, industrialized process, okay? And give you some examples of what we are looking at changing to have something more sustainable, okay? Preventive agronomic systems are defined as impacts on reduced vulnerability to drought, heat, pests, and diseases, lower dependency on corrective inputs, stabilize yields under climate variability. This system-based approach is central to European Union Farm-to-Fork Strategy, Common Agriculture Policies, CAP, eco schemes, and Green Deal targets, which emphasize prevention, resilience, and resource efficiency. Okay, you see that we are moving from industrial agriculture to something more regenerative, something that actually respond more to the environment conditions, to the climate impacts, okay? Takes in consideration something that's very important, the carrying capacity. Each soil, each environment, each micro climate has its carrying capacity. We must respect it, otherwise we run unsustainable, okay? Next slide. soil cultivation for crop loss prevention. The objective of this chapter is to share with you that strengthen soil structure, root development, and biological function to stabilize yield and reduce stress-induced losses is key, okay? And the key dimensions of this knowledge is soil structure and root growth, soil organic matter, SOM, we're gonna be using the abbreviation of SOM here, and biological activity. Here, diving deeper into the chapter, soil structure, roots, and yield stability. You see this figure here on the right-hand side has been taken from the paper as well and shows you the difference between a soil structure of a good soil structure and a poor soil structure, okay? You see how the crusting acting here, how the water percolates, okay? How the particles vary in size. You have a different size, it's not stacked, you have something more balanced. Even though it's a corn, it's something that has been planted, but it's totally different when you're not using the proper techniques such as deep and continuous root system, efficient water infiltration aeration, greater tolerance to drought and heat, which will be the results of this. Loss preventive practices include reduce or conservation tillage. This is a real example of here. Control traffic farming. If you have, example, a tractor going, you not just tell the tractor driver to go. You got a plan. Where does the tractor goes, when it goes, and how it goes, okay? Strategic mechanical loosening where needed. Mechanical loosening, we can understand here as some subsoiling, but we can use some natural techniques, such as cover crops is one of the examples. If we use some cover crops on the soil, or maybe some species, like, I'll give you a real example. There is a leguminous called pigeon pea. In English, the botanical name is Cajanus cajan, which is known as a subsoiling plant, meaning that this plant, when you plant it, they just break the layers of compacted soil, saving you of an operation of machinery and returning nitrogen from the atmosphere to the soil. This is a type of loosening soil using natural technology, just a simple one, okay? Improved soil structure acts as a natural buffer against climatic stress, reducing yield variability. Imagine the capacity of the soil on the left-hand side of this figure to withhold and retain water. The capacity of this soil to act as a cushion of a tractor wheel. Totally different than the right one. You know, you see the tillage pen there. Tillage pen is an expression that we use when the soil is compacted, okay? And we do have compaction on the different levels, and that's very hard. You need some machinery on that situation, but you can start and decompact such a soil with some natural techniques, such as the one I shared with you, okay? Soil organic matter and biological activity. Here you see on the right-hand figure, another graphic I depicted from a paper. You see a multistrata plant here, you know? You see that some of the cycles of the soil organic matter, how it acts, how they react with the soil microorganisms and etc. So this paper is very interesting because it talks about the particle organic matter, the mineral associated organic matter, and how to distinguish them, how they actually react and what the results we have at the end of the day, okay? Just giving you an example of the importance of some soil organic matter. Buffered nutrients and water. Soil organic matter has the highest potential of water retention, very important. Support microbial diversity, and this diversity will actually help the nutrients availability and the water retention. Enhances disease suppression and stress tolerance. When we say enhances disease suppression, meaning that with a rich soil, I have many different species of microorganisms, such as bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and etc. These multitude of microorganisms will help the plant fight back some diseases, okay? And fight back some stresses, such as drought, excess of water, and etc. Okay? Some of the key strategies for soil organic matter incorporating to increase of some soil organic matter. Incorporation of crop residues and organic amendments, diverse crop rotations and intercropping. Okay, when you have a different cropping, like in this example here of this picture, you have a different root depth, you have a different canopy height, so you have a diverse crop, okay, which gives a lot of biodiversity to the soil. Integration of legumes. Legumes are so important. Remember the nodules, remember the rhizobacterium, which is the bacteria that fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere all the way to the soil. It's so important. Reduce soil disturbance. Try not to touch the soil. If you can't, okay. But if you keep the structure well, you have a very good condition for soil organic matter improvement, okay? High soil organic matter soils show lower yield instability and reduce crop loss risk. Very natural technology on the climate changing environment, okay? The other chapter of our presentation, fertilization strategies to reduce yield loss. The objective of these strategies is to align nutrient availability with crop demands while minimizing environmental losses. This is the main idea of this, to show you the importance of it. And the core principles of this theme is to show you the balanced nutrient supply, nutrient use efficiency, NUE, and synchronization with crop growth stages, how these are so core principles, how these are so important, okay? Back into this, balanced nutrient supply and crop resilience. Unbalanced nutrition. Unbalanced nutrition does not mean the lack of nutrition. Sometimes mean excess of nutrition. It does weaken plant defenses, increase lodging and pest pressure, raises yield instability, okay? Plants can cope with a certain amount of fertilizer. If you put too much, it doesn't mean that it will produce more. Sometimes not produce less, because it takes energy from them to process such an amount of fertilizers. They don't have energy to grow vegetatively or maybe reproductively, which are two different stages of growth. Loss preventive fertilizations practices. Examples for you: soil and tissue testing. If you understand your soil, the amount of nutrient that is available in your soil, if you understand the amount of nutrient is within your plant, you understand how much you must input into the system. Sometimes you don't need the classic NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potash. You don't need. If you see your soil is balanced and your plant does not need, just apply what is needed, okay? When you do that, you balance macro and micronutrient management. Other technique that you can use is split application of fertilization, aligned with the growth stages. It's very different if you apply, example, a nitrogen, a urea, which is a nitrogen, is a form of nitrogen, into the phase V1, or maybe if you apply on the V6 of the corn. Just give you an example. Understanding the split application and aligning with the growth stages helps you a lot understanding what to do and avoid losses, okay? Use of slow release and stabilized fertilizer is one of technologies, can be used depending on the condition. If you have a place that will be dry during this intermediate season, slow release might be the course, might be one of your solutions. You got to understand each of solutions, and then these are just examples, but understanding your system, you'll be able to act accordingly using the right resource, but not just using it, using the right one, but use when it's needed, okay? Balanced nutrition enhances physiological resilience and yield stability. And this figure here shows you the difference of solely chemical fertilizer use, like a sole, just using one, and the integrated nutrient management. These are the difference between those two. How it impacts on the growth, on the leaching, on the emission, volatilization, etc. This has been depicted, has been extracted from a paper that I believe that it's very important for you to understand this part of the presentation, okay? Let's move to the next slide. Nutrient use efficiency and environmental protection. Low nutrient use efficiency leads to leaching going down, volatilization going up, runoff going surface. These are the difference, okay? When someone says it's leaching, it's percolating down on the soil profile. When someone says volatilization, normally happens with urea, like it's reacting and it's actually volatilizing to the air. You're losing it to the air. And runoff, when it's running on a surface. These are the difference between those three examples. Environmental pollution, back here. economic losses without yield gains. You apply a certain amount of fertilization, which costs this amount of money, more than maybe the last year you have applied, but you're not getting this difference of production because you're not applying correctly. The nutrient use efficiency is not properly, well, it's not efficient. Okay? Some of a sustainable nutrient use efficiency strategies to share with you. Precision fertilization, one of examples is variable rate. What does that mean, variable rate? You have a paddock, 10 hectares paddock. I'll be using 150 kilograms of nitrogen here. Well, in the entire 10 hectares, or maybe 5 here, 3 there, 10 there. This is a variable rate when you use the right on the right size. Sensors will help you understanding which demands more, and GPS helps you tracking right one. Okay? Integration of organic and mineral inputs, combining both types of inputs, not just one or the other, but combining which one will cause a better response. Biological inputs such as mycorrhiza, PGPRS, some of the micronutrients from biological inputs, some mycorrhiza, which helps nutrient availability, water retention, etc. That can be one combination. And temporal synchronization of nutrient supply. Example, if I'll be applying 3 times, but why applying 3 times during the harvest, during the cropping? Why not 4 times? Why not 2 times? You got to decide that based on what you are cultivating, okay? Improved nutrient use efficiency aligns directly with the farm-to-fork nutrient loss reduction targets, okay? This again figure here, it's based on a publication that's linked to the written material you can access whenever you need, okay? The pest control and crop prevention loss chapter, the main objective is show that maintain pest populations below economic damage threshold while minimizing pesticide use dependency is so important. And the framework for this can be not just that, but three things to share with you. IPM, integrated pest management, resistant prevention, ecological regulation. We're going to be exploring some of those themes here. IPM prioritizes prevention and monitoring. Okay, you will not be fighting the pest and disease. You actually prevent it. Different. Threshold-based interventions. I will act once I reach such a threshold. Not just because I saw a bug in my plantation, I'm going to be spraying. No, you got to understand the threshold. That's why you must act accordingly. Okay. Biological and cultural controls, combining, diversification of controls, using the biological organisms to control instead of purely chemical is one of the strategies, and target chemical use as a last resource. You don't go to the chemical at first. You do all the preventive, the threshold evaluation, you use the biological control, and then you go to the chemical use, not the opposite. This is very important here. Core IPM tools, core integrated pest management tools, crop rotation, field scouting and threshold, field scouting, and you go following the rows of your plantation, or maybe crossing the rows, identifying how many pests you have found for each square meter or each 2 square meters, whatever, depending on the strategy or technique you're using. But this is very important, the field scouting. Instead of thinking or pretending, go and do that, you and your team. Biological control and habitat diversification. Remember, as more diversified it is, more enemies you will have. So you have a more diverse environment, you have more insects, and these insects normally they fight back each other. They help you, okay? Mechanical and cultural practices instead of a purely chemical. Very important. IPM stabilize yields while preserving ecosystem service. Very important. This figure here show very simply the steps and the phases of IPM. How to prevent, how to monitor, and how to intervene. What to do to prevent, how you monitor, and how you intervene. Okay? It's very important. You don't do the last first. You got to follow up some things before. And the IPM helps you a lot understand which phases applies and how to do that. Reducing pesticide dependency and resistance. You see this figure here? You see some generation of insects. See, first generation before pesticide application. You see? You have one little bug that's resistant. After application, this is still resistant, but you find out that two are more resistant as well. Before pesticide application, later generation, you have this amount of red one, which is resistant, and then after application, they just reproduced. Meaning that if you don't do accordingly, if you don't use a preventive strategy such as rotation of modes of action, example, using only the same pesticide on the same time, same way, will not be the answer. Try to combine, like the slide before, combine organic control, combine biological control. That will help you a lot. Resistant crop varieties can be one of the answers as well. You can find some varieties that are insect repellent in some time. Conservation of natural enemies, very important. If you have a diversifications within your area, that will help you conserve natural enemies habitat. That will help you, as I said before on the previous slide, fighting back those unnatural, maybe natural disease and bugs, pardon. Precision and timing of application, not just apply. Apply when the threshold is after scouting and when the threshold is reached, okay? Over-reliance on pesticides can cause drives resistant development very clearly, undermines long-term control efficacy easily, and increase crop loss risk over time. Very important. And this is the reducing dependency is central to European Union pesticide reduction targets. Easily. We must decrease in the entire world. And this is more latent into the European Union space, you know, and reduce the pesticide dependency. That's why it's not finding a miraculous recipe. It's a combination of good practices that will result differently. And that's one of the main role of you as a technician, to not just go to the easy. Use a brain to think about a different answer to a problem, not just finding one answer. You know, sometimes for a highly complex problem, we need a highly complex way of thinking as well. Sometimes not hard, but think about it, okay? Resistant and resilient plant growth. These figures just show the biotic and abiotic stresses, okay? And here down there show you enhanced stress tolerance and nutrient availability. And this is very important regarding resistant and resilient plant growth. When you have these systems, you normally have a combination of a resilient system. There is a combination of effects. Pest and disease resistant varieties, drought and heat tolerant traits, local adaptation, and genetic and functional diversity. If you want the resilient system, you need at least those, okay? Diversified systems, buffer, how they act. They act as a buffer against climatic and biological shocks. Remember, if you have a more diverse set of plants, more diverse row of trees around your paddock, you have a buffer against climatic, biological shocks, reduce reliance on emergency inputs, deliver more stable long-term yields. You can actually predict longer times, okay? Genetic and system diversity are foundations of crop loss prevention, not trade-off with productivity. Very important. When you have genetic and diversified systems, you don't have a trade-off. You have a problem. You don't have a high cost of opportunity. You actually have a great, because they actually helps your system to be more resilient and reliant, okay? This was the module number 4. You see, I have shared some technical papers with you. In this presentation specifically, you will see that I have shared more papers, technical papers with you, because the theme is very scientific sensitive. Okay, like this figure here has been depicted from a paper from MDPI, I reckon. An interesting, very interesting journal of science. And it helps you understanding the most updated technologies, the state of arts of plant growth and sustainability. And this is very interesting. I hope you have enjoyed this simple introduction of this module. I could have a training entirely for this module, more than 10 hours, 20 hours, just talking about this, because this is a very important for us. It begins before the factory, before the food industry, the food, not the factory itself, but the things we do properly on the farm side will reflect directly on our produce, that will reflect on the work of the food industry, on the line. You have a better fruit, you have a more resistant fruit, a better taste, a better sensorial fruit. That's why it's so important. I hope you have enjoyed it. Don't hesitate in reading the papers. I strongly advise you to dive deeper into the knowledge that has been written down on the bulky, on the biggest written material, and answer the questions. That will help you a lot understanding more what I'm talking about and fixing the knowledge. Thank you for your attention. I'm Professor Rafael, and I see you on module number 6. Thank you.